Good afternoon, Tony Dartino, doing my live with Tony. And I wanted to cover with you an article that I was reading last night in the current issue of the Saturday Evening Post. Uh, just one of my favorite magazines in terms of what it brings about life and some of the articles that they put in it that it just kind of grabbed you. And here's one that is written by Patty McCracken that talks about sharpening your memory. Sharpen your memory. And of course, being the founder of the USA Memory Championship and working with people for almost 30 years on teaching them how to improve their memories, I find an article that sharpens your memory to be of great interest. And then the subheading that Patty writes about is a neuroscientist offers tips for preserving brain power and improving recall. And of course, that's my cup of tea. That's what I want to focus on. And memory works somewhat like a muscle. There are ways to strengthen it, especially as we age. And so, my goodness, from the title of the article to the subtitle to the little box here that they're putting, I mean, it's like bullseye, bullseye. And of course, here's the picture. And I'm saying, my God, this is it, man. This is what I want to read. And I start reading the article. And lo and behold, one of my favorite people of all time is Dr. Richard Restak, who's a clinical professor of neurology at George Washington School of Medicine and Health. And I'm like, Richard, he's back. And I'm reading about it. I always remember a call I got from Richard that's probably now about 10 years ago, and tells me I'm Richard Restak and I'm designing a pen that I'd like to be able to give to the winner of your USA Memory Championship. And so Richard and I had a wonderful conversation and telling me about what he was doing. I also got to meet him when Jim Carroll was doing a session over at the military group over at the Bethesda Hospital, and got to meet with Richard there. And so he's looking at what I'm doing, and he says, you need to keep doing this. This is important. What you're doing is powerful stuff, and people need it. And here I am, years and years later, still reading about Richard Restak, who's written more than 20 books on the subject, the neuroscience of memory, and teaching people about it. And so in this article, it talks about the complete guide to memory, the strength of strengthening your mind. And so I'm like 82 years old, and he's still doing his work, and I still love him, and I think he's just been fantastic. And so however Patty McCracken has found him, I think it's great. And it brings me back to the memories of our memory championship and what we're doing with the USA Memory events and the work we're doing at MIT. And it's just, wow. So I read this article with great enthusiasm, with great interest, and it brings me back to the conversations I've had with Richard and what he talks about and the beliefs that we share in common. So we start with memory works somewhat like a muscle, and there are ways to strengthen it, especially as we age. So we've talked about that, and in fact that our memories can be improved as we get older. There's nothing that says at a certain age your memory needs to fall off the cliff and therefore you start forgetting everything. There are cognitive functions that can be improved, can be exercised. And what I'm thinking, what I'm trying to say is we haven't learned enough about that to where people populate and sign into it. We got the Fitbit craze, we got the exercise craze. An exercise that people think about is not how do I exercise my muscle-like memory in my brain. As Patty writes here, everybody now is concentrating on physical fitness. The gyms are packed. You see people walking, you see people riding bikes, you see people doing all kinds of activities in parks and streets that are on the physical side of things. But do they ever worry or give attention to mental fitness? And that's the important thing about memory, so says Richard Restak, who is now 82. if you can keep yourself performing normally in regard to memory, right? So now, boy, he and I sat and talked about that for a bit. You're more likely far away from any kind of dementia. And so in my world, I see people more and more worried about, God, I don't mind if I live to be 100, but boy, I sure want to know who I'm talking to and who the people are that I love and care about and I can communicate with. And so this is almost like, wow, this has brought me back to a lot of conversations and the whole purpose of the USA Memory Championship. As Patty goes on to write, there are 3 stages involved in the forming of memory. I talk about, first of all, how are you putting it into your brain? So I talk about the senses. Are you seeing it? Are you touching it? Are you smelling it? Are you tasting it? How are you putting it into your brain, which then has an important factor of how you then code it. How do you put it into your brain so you code it into these neurons so that it stays for you to be able to store it? So now, and there are things called memory rhythms that we've learned and we teach people about. So not only are you encoding it in there, but it's now going to be stored. Now, why do you want to restore it? Because you got to sort out what you're storing, what's your storage facility, and how do you want to recall it? So as she goes on to say here, how do we best encode it? How do we store it? And how do we retrieve it? So the first thing you got to think about is, how am I putting it in? Then what am I doing to make sure it's stored and it stays stored? So that's an interesting point, because people think, well, gee, if it goes in, now I got it and now it's going to stay. No, there's got to be what we call memory rhythms, or cycles of review of what you're putting into it, so that it stays in storage for as long as you may want to be able to access it and use it. And then when you want to retrieve it, it facilitates your ability to put a hook, I call it, and pull it right out, and now you've got it for use, which is the formula I learned years ago from Tony Buzan on creativity. Creativity's formula is simple. What do I have in my storage memory, and what new informations are coming to me? And bam, now I've got creativity. I can create new things from that. So this just touches all of that. And what this article goes on to say is, it's not enough to do crossword puzzles and brain teasers like Wordle. That is not what's going to be helping you in the storage, the retrieval, and the creativity of it all. So doing crossword puzzles and brain teasers are not the best solutions for how you exercise your brain. Mental challenges. What are you doing to mentally challenge? That's the holy grail today in science. What inputs are you giving to your brain, and skills are you bringing to your ongoing encoding process that enable you to take things in that you want to remember, put them into your storage, and facilitate their long-term storage capacity and retrieve it? It made me think of reading an article about whiskey and how many years the whiskey is stored before somebody finally decides they want to pull it out. It made me think about it in terms of memory. How do we put it into our brain so it is stored, so we have retrieval for it, X number of years when we want to use it? So for better use of your storage, imagination is something we talk about that strengthens memory. And it's just like using weights to build muscle. Make a game of stretching the memory muscle. So create stories around items or events you want to remember. The worse or the wilder the tale, the better your ability to retain and remember it becomes. And so as I read through this article, it just brought back a lot of memories, brought back conversations I've had with Richard Restak, who I have great respect for. And my God, when he first called me and I got to hear him, Richard Restak, it's like, are you the Richard Restak? I got your books on my bookshelf. Are you that guy? And it was yes. And he came to the USA Memory Championship and presented the Monty Gropper pen to the champion that year as to who won it. And it was just a great opportunity to talk with him, and then getting to meet him in Washington, D.C., and then reading this article just brought back memories in my storage that just extremely exciting. It just brought a lot of energy and enthusiasm into my day. And I think the author of this has done a really nice job of putting the simplicity to what Dr. Resnick is talking about. And I'm going to take another crack at this on my Friday broadcast and add some of what those tips are, because at the closing of it, it has something called brain boosters, and I found some of that very unique. And where can you think about some of these and add to the curriculum that we've got at the Memory Institute here at the YMCA. So great article. I encourage all of you to get out and get the Saturday Evening Post and get to page 37, I think it's going to be. Get to page 36, and I think you'll enjoy the article, and send me some feedback on it. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you back here on Friday.